The eviction notice came on a Tuesday morning, taped to the door of the storage unit, where Carmen Ruiz and her 19-year-old daughter Melissa had been sleeping for the past 6 weeks. 72 hours to vacate. Past due balance $847. The paper fluttered in the desert wind like a white flag of surrender. Carmen pressed her palm against her lower back, where pain had been building for 3 days straight. 42 years old, 5 months pregnant with Melissa's baby sister, living in a 10-by-10 storage unit in Henderson, Nevada, because the motel they'd been staying at had raised rates from $89 a week to $135, and they couldn't keep up. Melissa sat on a stack of boxes containing everything they owned, morning sickness making her face pale, despite the heat already pushing past 95 degrees at 8 a.m. She was 7 months along, belly prominent beneath an oversized t-shirt from a concert she'd attended when life still made sense. Before the accident that killed Carmen's husband, before Melissa's boyfriend disappeared the moment he learned about the pregnancy, before the medical bills and the missed rent and the cascade of losses that left them here, in this concrete box, counting coins for food. "Mom, what are we going to do?" The question had no good answer. Carmen had been asking it herself every hour for weeks. The checking account showed $238.67. Her last paycheck from the cleaning company wouldn't arrive for another 5 days, and it would be maybe $180 after they'd cut her hours again. Her car, a 2007 Honda Civic with 198,000 miles, sat in the parking lot running on fumes and prayer. The engine light had been on for 2 months. "We'll figure something out." Baby. The lie came easier than it should have. "I need to check my phone, see if any jobs called back." The phone battery was at 3%, the charging cord frayed and barely functional. 7 unread emails. 6 were spam. 1 was from Nevada State Land Management. Subject line: auction notification, property available. Carmen almost deleted it. Spam about property sales when you were homeless felt like cruel irony, but something made her open it anyway. Maybe desperation. Maybe the wild hope that came from having nothing left to lose. Surplus federal property auction. Saturday, June 18th. Various parcels including decommissioned military installations. Minimum bid requirements starting at $1. Online and in-person bidding available. She scrolled through the list. Warehouse in Reno. Minimum bid $5,000. Communications tower near Elko. A minimum bid $2,500. Decommissioned Cold War bunker facility. Yucca Valley area. Structure condemned. Hazardous materials possible. Sold as is with no warranties or guarantees. Minimum bid $1. $1. Carmen read the listing 3 times to make sure she understood. A Cold War bunker, underground, probably concrete walls 3 feet thick, temperature controlled by the earth itself. No landlord, no rent, no eviction notices. The listing included 7 photographs. Exterior showed a flat concrete structure barely visible in desert scrubland, half buried and weathered, surrounded by chain-link fencing topped with rusted barbed wire. Warning signs: government property. No trespassing. Authorized personnel only. The signs looked decades old. Paint faded nearly white by sun and time. Interior shots revealed a long tunnel, maybe 8 feet wide, with fluorescent lights dangling from brackets. Rooms branching off the main corridor. One photo showed a massive metal door, circular and sealed, like something from a submarine. Another revealed what looked like a control room, panels and switches and equipment, covered in dust so thick it might have been archaeological. Property includes approximately 2.3 acres surface land, plus underground facility. Estimated 8,000 square feet interior space. Original construction, 1962. Decommissioned, 1992. No utilities connected. buyer responsible for all inspections, permits, cleanup, and compliance with EPA regulations. Melissa appeared behind her shoulder, reading over her arm. A bunker? Mom, that's crazy. Carmen looked at the eviction notice still clutched in her other hand. 72 hours until they'd be on the street. Then she looked at her daughter's belly, at the life growing there that deserved better than this, at Melissa's pale face and the fear they both carried like a weight that got heavier every single day. Crazy is living in a storage unit when you're pregnant. Crazy is having nowhere to go and a baby coming in 3 months. This is a chance. But $1, there's got to be something wrong with it. Hazardous materials, condemned structure. Mom, what if it's radioactive, or full of asbestos? Or what if it's shelter? Real shelter. Walls and a roof and space to breathe. We can inspect it. We can test for hazards. But if we don't even try, we're giving up before we start. The battery died mid-sentence, screen going black. Carmen stared at her dark reflection in the glass. When had she gotten so thin? When had the lines around her eyes grown so deep? When had survival become the only ambition she could afford? She walked to the storage facility office, borrowed the manager's computer and printer, filled out the online auction registration form, and printed the confirmation. Bidder number 127. The auction was in 4 days. The manager, a woman named Rita, who'd been letting them slide on late payments out of sympathy that was clearly running out, looked at the papers. You're bidding on property? Honey, you can't even pay your storage bill. It's $1 minimum bid. And if someone else bids $2, then I bid $3. Carmen's voice came out harder than intended. I have $238. If it takes every penny to get us a place where we're not getting evicted every month, that's what it takes. Rita studied her with an expression somewhere between pity and admiration. You got guts, I'll give you that. But Carmen? That bunker listing? I've seen those auctions. Government offloads property they don't want because it's more trouble than it's worth. Contamination, structural damage, legal liability. They're not giving away bargains. They're getting rid of problems. Maybe. But right now, their problem might be our solution. The next 4 days passed in a blur of anxiety and preparation. Carmen researched Cold War bunkers on library computers, learning about construction methods, ventilation systems, radiation shielding. The facilities had been built during the height of nuclear paranoia, designed to house government officials or military personnel through months of underground living. Concrete walls reinforced with steel, or air filtration, water storage. Some had power generation systems. Most had been abandoned when the Cold War ended, and maintaining them became too expensive. They sat empty for decades, forgotten relics of paranoia that never manifested. She called county offices asking about the Yucca Valley bunker specifically. Nobody seemed to know much. The property had been federal, transferred to state management in 2008, sat unused and unwanted ever since. Zoning was mixed-use desert. No restrictions on residential occupancy if the structure passed inspection. Melissa grew quieter as the auction date approached, morning sickness intensifying, fear making her withdrawn. She stopped arguing about the plan but didn't support it either. Just existed in the limbo of someone who'd run out of energy to fight. Carmen pawned her wedding ring on Friday afternoon, the gold band her husband had saved 3 months to buy, the symbol of promises that death had broken. The pawn shop owner offered $40. She negotiated to $65, added it to the auction fund. Saturday morning arrived hot and cloudless. The auction was being held at a county building in Las Vegas, a 45-minute drive from Henderson. Carmen and Melissa left at 7 a.m., the Civic's engine rattling in ways that suggested it knew this might be its last trip. They didn't speak much during the drive. What was there to say? This gamble was either salvation or the final stupid mistake that would leave them with nothing. No middle ground existed. The auction room smelled like old carpet and air conditioning that couldn't quite keep up with desert heat. Maybe 40 people scattered across folding chairs. Most looked like investors or flippers, studying phones and tablets, calculating profit margins with the cold precision of people for whom this was business, not survival. Carmen and Melissa sat near the back. A woman in an expensive suit, 2 rows ahead, kept glancing back at them with an expression that mixed curiosity and contempt. Homeless people didn't belong at property auctions. Everyone's stare said so. The auctioneer was a man in his 60s, voice worn smooth by decades of selling everything from cattle to bankruptcy liquidations. He moved through the smaller items first. Storage units, vehicle lots. Then he got to the properties. Lot 47. Decommissioned Cold War bunker facility. Yucca Valley area. Approximately 2.3 acres. Underground structure approximately 8,000 square feet. Sold as is. No warranties. Buyer assumes all liability. Minimum bid $1. Do I have $1? Carmen's hand went up before her brain could second guess. $1. The woman in the expensive suit turned around fully now, staring. Someone in the front laughed. The auctioneer nodded. We have $1. Do I hear 2? Silence. 10 seconds. 20. People were calculating. A bunker in the desert. Condemned. Potentially contaminated. The cost to make it usable could run 6 figures. For investors, the math didn't work. Going once at $1. The woman in the suit shifted in her seat. Her hand started to rise, then stopped. She'd done her homework, Carmen realized. Knew the property wasn't worth the trouble. Going twice. Carmen held her breath. Melissa's hand found hers, squeezed tight. Please, please, please. The prayer repeated in her mind like a mantra. I'd sold to bidder, $127 for $1. The gavel cracked. The room exhaled. Someone behind them muttered about stupid people making stupid decisions. The woman in the suit shook her head and went back to her phone. Carmen stood on legs that shook. They walked to the registration desk, where a clerk processed the paperwork with the bored efficiency of someone who'd seen every kind of buyer and seller humanity produced. Payment of $1 plus processing fees. Total came to $47.50. Carmen counted out the bills and coins, every penny mattering. The clerk handed over a folder. Deed, property maps, keys, EPA disclosure forms, liability waivers. Congratulations. You now own a Cold War bunker. Outside in the parking lot, Melissa finally spoke. Mom, what did we just do? We just got a home, baby. Or something that might become one. The drive to Yucca Valley took 2 hours on highways that cut through desert so vast it made human concerns feel microscopic. Melissa dozed against the window, exhausted by pregnancy and stress. Carmen drove with both hands on the wheel, knuckles white, mind racing. The property wasn't on GPS. She followed the county map and coordinates, turning off the main highway onto a dirt road that barely qualified as a path. Rocks scraped the Civic's undercarriage. The suspension groaned. Then the fence appeared. Chain link topped with barbed wire, exactly like the photos. The gate had a padlock that looked newer than the fence itself, recently replaced by the county probably. One of the keys from the folder turned smoothly. The gate swung open with a metal shriek that scattered a lizard from nearby rocks. Carmen drove through, so it closed the gate behind them and continued up the path. The bunker entrance emerged from the earth like something prehistoric. Concrete structure, maybe 20 feet square at ground level, weathered to the color of bone. Ventilation pipes stuck up at angles, rusted and capped. What might have been an observation post or guard station stood to one side, windows broken, door hanging crooked. She parked next to the main entrance. Melissa woke, looked around, and her face went pale. Mom, This looks like a horror movie set. It looks like shelter. Come on. The entrance was a heavy metal door, industrial grade, with a wheel lock like a bank vault. The second key fit the lock beneath the wheel. Carmen turned it, heard bolts retracting. Then she grabbed the wheel with both hands and pulled. The door moved with surprising smoothness, and someone had maintained the mechanism, hinges swinging on well-oiled bearings. Cool air rushed out, carrying the smell of concrete and stillness and decades of isolation. A tunnel stretched into darkness. Carmen pulled out the flashlight she'd bought with part of the pawn money. The beam cut through shadows, revealing concrete walls, ceiling, floor. Everything looked solid. No visible cracks, no water damage, no signs of collapse or decay. She stepped inside. The temperature dropped immediately, maybe 65 degrees. Comfortable. Natural insulation from the desert heat above. Melissa followed reluctantly. Their footsteps echoed. The tunnel extended maybe 60 feet before branching. Left led to what looked like dormitory areas. Right opened into larger spaces. Carmen went right. The flashlight beam swept across a room that must have been a command center. Control panels lined one wall, ancient equipment with analog dials and switches. Dust covered everything in a layer thick enough to write in. But underneath the dust, nothing looked damaged. Just old, forgotten. More rooms beyond, storage areas with empty shelves, a kitchen with industrial appliances that hadn't been used in 30 years, bathroom facilities, multiple stalls, tile that had aged but hadn't cracked, a room that might have been medical bay or office space. The place was vast, room after room branching off the main corridors, living quarters with bunk beds still bolted to walls, a recreation area with a ping-pong table and folding chairs. Everything covered in dust and time, but structurally intact. But Melissa stood in the doorway of one sleeping quarters, hand on her belly. We're supposed to live here? Underground? Like moles? Until we can afford something better. Until your baby is born, and we're stable, and we have options again. Yes, we're supposed to live here. Because this is what we have, and it's more than we had yesterday. The truth hit hard in the filtered flashlight beam. This wasn't ideal. It wasn't even good. It was desperate survival in a concrete box under the Nevada desert. But it was theirs. No rent. No landlord. No eviction notices. Walls that would keep them safe and cool during scorching summers and warm during cold desert winters. They explored for 3 hours, mapping rooms, checking for structural issues, looking for signs of contamination or hazards. Found none. The bunker had been built to last centuries, and it showed. Concrete walls 2 feet thick, reinforced ceilings, everything over-engineered by Cold War paranoia. The power panel was in the main control room, circuit breakers labeled in fading marker. Carmen tried the main switch. Nothing happened. Of course not. Utilities had been disconnected decades ago. Water system was similar. Pipes still intact but dry. The bunker had its own well system, according to the documents, but the pump was offline. Mom, we don't have electricity or water. How are we supposed to live here? The same way people lived before utilities existed. We bring water in jugs until we can get the well working. We use lanterns and flashlights until we can get power. We figure it out one day at a time because we don't have another choice. Melissa's eyes filled. I'm tired of not having choices. Carmen crossed the dusty concrete and pulled her daughter close. I know, baby. I'm tired too. But we're going to get through this. You're going to have your baby in a safe place. We're going to build something here. Not today, not this week, but eventually. I promise. They spent the first night in the Civic, parked above ground because neither was ready to sleep in the dark bunker yet. Morning brought reality in the form of a long to-do list that felt impossible but necessary. First priority: water. Carmen drove to a hardware store, bought 5-gallon jugs with the last of her money, filled them at a gas station, brought them into the bunker, and designated one room near the entrance as their living quarters, swept the dust, wiped down surfaces, set up their sleeping bags on old bunks. Second priority: light. No, the flashlights wouldn't last forever. She bought LED lanterns on credit cards she couldn't really afford to use, set them up in key rooms, creating islands of light in the vast darkness. Third priority: ventilation. The bunker had air shafts leading to surface, but they were capped and sealed. She spent an afternoon clearing debris from vents, checking that air could flow. The system still worked passively, pulling fresh air down and pushing stale air out through natural convection. Melissa helped when she could, but pregnancy limited her mobility and energy. She mostly organized their belongings, created a space in the sleeping quarters that felt less like a survival situation and more like an actual bedroom, hung a sheet for privacy, arranged their few possessions on shelves, tried to make the concrete box feel like home. A week passed, then 2. They fell into routine. Carmen worked cleaning jobs during the day, bringing in the bare minimum money needed for food and supplies. Melissa stayed at the bunker, resting, nesting, preparing for a baby that would be born into this underground existence. The mockery started when Carmen made the mistake of mentioning their situation to coworkers. Living in a bunker? Like actually underground? One woman laughed outright. "Honey, that's not quirky. That's crazy. You're pregnant and living in a hole in the ground." Word spread. The cleaning crew gossiped. Soon everyone knew. Carmen Ruiz, the woman so broke she bought a condemned bunker for $1. The woman raising her pregnant daughter underground like some kind of survivalist nut. Rita from the storage facility called, supposedly to check on them, but really to gossip. "So I heard you actually moved into that bunker." "Carmen, that can't be sanitary. You're pregnant. Your daughter's pregnant. Have you even had it inspected for asbestos? For lead? For radiation?" "We're testing it." Carmen lied. The truth was she couldn't afford professional inspections that would run thousands of dollars. She was relying on internet research and basic common sense. The bunker had been decommissioned, not abandoned. The government had cleared it for auction. That had to mean something. Her sister called from California, voice dripping with the kind of pity that felt worse than insult. "Carmen, this is insane. You need to come stay with me until you get back on your feet." "Living underground? What are you, a pioneer woman from the 1800s? This is 2024. We have standards. Your spare room has your yoga equipment and craft supplies. There's no space for 2 pregnant women. Thanks for the offer. But we're fine. You're not fine. You're desperate. And you're making decisions that are going to hurt that baby." The call ended badly. Family relationships strained by poverty and pride. Carmen lay in her bunk that night, hand on her belly where her second daughter was growing, and wondered if her sister was right. Was she being foolish? Was she risking their health and safety for stubborn independence? But the alternative was what? Homelessness? A shelter that would separate them? Begging family who would help but make them feel like burdens forever? Melissa spoke from her bunk across the room. "Mom, are we going to be okay?" The question had no certain answer. "Yes, baby. We're going to be okay." At 3 weeks, Carmen decided to explore the entire bunker systematically. They'd been using maybe 1/3 of the space, sticking to the areas near the entrance. But the complex was larger than she'd realized. Corridors extended deeper. She needed to know exactly what they owned. She went alone, leaving Melissa resting. Took her best flashlight and a crude map she'd been sketching. Walked past the areas they'd been using, deeper into the complex, following tunnels that branched and reconnected, in patterns that suggested deliberate maze-like design. The bunker was enormous, room after room of dormitories, storage areas, equipment bays. She found what looked like an armory, empty now, but with gun racks still bolted to walls. Found a communications room with radio equipment so old it belonged in a museum. Found a room filled with filing cabinets, all empty, drawers hanging open like mouths frozen mid-scream. At the deepest point she'd reached, maybe 300 feet from the entrance, the tunnel ended at a heavy door. Not like the others. This one was different. Vault-style, circular, with a wheel lock that required a combination. Carmen stopped, flashlight beams steady on the door. This hadn't been in the photographs, hadn't been mentioned in the listing. A sealed room in a decommissioned bunker. Why? She tried the wheel. Locked solid. The combination lock showed no numbers, just positions, like a safe from a bank. Someone had sealed this deliberately, locking something away so thoroughly that 30 years later, it remained inaccessible. Her mind raced through possibilities, hazardous materials. That's what the listing had warned about. Maybe this was where they'd stored chemicals or radioactive materials. Maybe opening it would expose them to contamination. Or maybe it was something else. Something valuable. Documents. Equipment. Something worth sealing in a vault instead of removing when the facility was decommissioned. She pressed her ear against the cold metal. Heard nothing. No hum of machinery, no sound of ventilation. Just silence thick enough to feel. Carmen took a photograph of the door, then backed away slowly. This was beyond her expertise. This required research, maybe professional help. Maybe she needed to report it to the county, find out what was supposed to be sealed in here. That night, she researched Cold War bunker security protocols, learned that classified materials were supposed to be removed before decommissioning. But sometimes things got forgotten. Sometimes in the chaos of military drawdowns and budget cuts, equipment or documents got sealed away with the intention of retrieval that never happened. What if someone had sealed something valuable, and then the bureaucracy had simply forgotten? 30 years was a long time. Personnel retired, records got lost. Buildings changed hands from military to federal to state management. Things fell through cracks. Melissa asked what she'd found. Carmen described the door, but downplayed it. Just another locked room. Probably storage. Nothing to worry about. But she was worrying. The sealed room occupied her thoughts like an itch she couldn't scratch. What was behind that door? And if it was something valuable, something important, did they have any legal claim to it? The property deed was straightforward. They owned the bunker and everything inside it. As is, no warranties. If something had been left behind during decommissioning, technically it belonged to the new owner. But that logic only worked if what was inside was legal to own. Classified documents would still be government property. Weapons or hazardous materials would have to be reported and properly disposed of. She needed to open that door. Needed to know. The not knowing was worse than any possible answer. Carmen spent the next few days researching combination locks and vault doors. Learned that Cold War-era military facilities used specific types of locks. The combination would be either recorded in facility documents or known only to specific personnel who'd since retired or died. Breaking in would require professional safe-cracking, thousands of dollars she didn't have, or patience and trial and error that might take years, unless the combination was written down somewhere. Facility managers were supposed to keep records. Maybe somewhere in this vast bunker, in one of the many rooms she hadn't fully searched, documentation existed. She started systematically going through every room, every cabinet, every drawer. Most were empty. But in what must have been the facility manager's office, she found a desk with a locked drawer. The wood was old enough that forcing it took only moderate effort. Inside, maintenance logs from the 1980s, equipment manifests, personnel rosters, and a small black notebook with combinations and access codes written on the cover in faded marker. Carmen's hands shook as she opened it. Pages listed various locks throughout the facility. Doors, storage units, security systems. The entries were dated, and some crossed out and replaced with new combinations when codes changed. Near the back, an entry that made her pulse spike. Archive Vault, Section D. Combination 45173288. Authorized personnel only. Do not share. Section D. The deepest section, where the sealed door waited. She checked the date of the entry. March 1991, 1 year before the facility was decommissioned. Someone had sealed that vault, recorded the combination, and then the whole facility had been shut down and abandoned. Carmen took the notebook and 3 LED lanterns, told Melissa she was doing more exploration, would be gone a few hours. Walked the now familiar path to Section D, to the sealed door that had been waiting 33 years for someone to open it. The combination lock was stiff from decades without use. She worked it carefully. 45 to the right, line 17 to the left, 32 to the right, 88 to the left. Felt the mechanism engage with a subtle click. Then she grasped the wheel and turned. It fought her. Rust or age or sheer stubbornness making the wheel resist. She pulled harder, muscles straining, sweat starting despite the cool air. The wheel suddenly gave, spinning freely. Bolts retracted with sounds like gunshots in the silence. The door swung open on hinges that groaned like something in pain. Cool air rushed out, drier than the bunker's general atmosphere, carrying a smell of paper and time and secrets kept too long. Carmen shined her flashlight inside and stopped breathing. The room was approximately 15 by 15 feet. Shelves lined every wall, floor to ceiling, and those shelves held something that shouldn't exist, couldn't exist. Money, currency, cash, stacks and stacks of it, bundles wrapped in paper bands printed with denominations and dates. But not just American currency, multiple currencies. She stepped closer, flashlight beams sweeping across the shelves. British pounds, German marks, French francs, Russian rubles, Japanese yen, all in denominations from the 1950s through 1980s. Foreign currency, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of dollars worth. No. Her voice came out as whisper. This isn't real. This can't be real. But it was. The money was physical, tangible, stacked with the kind of precision that suggested professional organization. Each shelf held specific currencies, labeled with tags describing the denomination and quantity. Her mind raced. This was Cold War-era foreign currency, probably collected by intelligence agencies, used for covert operations, paying informants, funding operations in foreign countries. When the Cold War ended, someone had consolidated it here, sealed it away, and then forgotten. Or meant to retrieve it, but never did. 30 years of bureaucratic neglect, leaving millions of dollars sitting in a bunker nobody wanted. Carmen backed out of the room, legs weak, head spinning. She closed the door, spun the combination lock, erased her footprints in the dust with her shoe. Then she walked back to their living quarters in a daze, mind trying to process what she'd just found, trying to understand the implications, trying to decide what the hell to do next. Because if this was real, if the money was genuine and could be converted, she'd just discovered a fortune. The kind of fortune that changed lives, that solved problems. That gave pregnant women and their daughters futures instead of survival. But it also might be illegal, might be government property, might get them arrested for theft if they touched it. Melissa was awake when Carmen returned, immediately noticing something was wrong. "Mom? What happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." Carmen sat heavily on her bunk, trying to find words. The sealed room. I opened it. And there's something in there. Something that might be very good or very bad. I need time to think about it. Time to research. Time to understand what we're dealing with. That night, lying in darkness, Carmen stared at the concrete ceiling and did math. If the currency was worth even a fraction of its face value, if it could be converted legally, if they could claim ownership, the numbers were staggering, life-changing, future-securing, everything they needed and more. But first, she needed to understand exactly what she'd found, what the law said about it, and whether claiming this fortune would save them or destroy them. Because finding treasure was the easy part. Keeping it, that was the challenge that would define everything that came next. Carmen didn't sleep. Couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those shelves lined with currency from nations that didn't even exist anymore. Soviet rubles, East German marks, Yugoslavian dinars. Money from a world that had ended when the Berlin Wall fell and the Cold War dissolved into history. By dawn, she'd filled 3 notebook pages with questions that had no easy answers. Was the currency still valid? Could foreign bills from the 1980s be converted to modern money? Who owned it legally? If it had been government property and they'd abandoned it, did finders keepers apply? She needed an expert, someone who understood international currency and military law and property rights. Someone who wouldn't immediately report her to authorities before she understood what rights she had. The library computer became her research station. Melissa stayed at the bunker, resting, unaware of what Carmen had discovered. Better to keep it quiet until she knew what they were dealing with. Hope was dangerous when it might be false. First question: foreign currency value. She learned that some Cold War-era money was worthless, replaced by new currencies when governments changed. The Soviet Union no longer existed. The ruble had been revalued. Old bills were collector's items, not legal tender. But other currencies had maintained or increased value. British pounds from the 1960s were still valid, though they'd need to be exchanged through specialty services. German Deutsche Marks had been converted to euros at fixed rates when Germany unified. French francs similarly had conversion value. She made lists: currencies that were worthless, currencies that retained value, currencies in between. The math was complex, requiring exchange rates and historical knowledge she didn't possess. Second question: legal ownership. She found precedents for finders claiming abandoned property. But military installations complicated things. Classified materials remained government property forever. Weapons, documents, equipment had to be surrendered. But money? The law was murkier. If the currency had been forgotten, truly abandoned, and the property had transferred through legal channels, the new owner might have legitimate claim. Might being the operative word. She needed a lawyer. But lawyers cost money she didn't have. And the moment she asked legal questions about Cold War currency found in a military bunker, she'd be flagged, investigated, possibly arrested for theft of government property before anyone determined if the property was actually still the government's. Carmen's phone buzzed. Text from her supervisor at the cleaning company. "Can you pick up a shift tonight?" The Bellagio. 8 rooms, $140. She accepted. They needed every dollar. Bills didn't stop because you found potential treasure. The baby would need supplies. Melissa needed prenatal care she'd been skipping because they couldn't afford copays. That evening, for cleaning hotel rooms that cost more per night than she made in a week, Carmen thought about the vault, about money sitting unused while people struggled. about the grotesque unfairness of a system where millions could be forgotten while families went homeless. The night cleaning supervisor, a woman named Paula who'd worked casinos for 20 years, noticed Carmen's distraction. "You okay? You seem somewhere else. Just tired. Pregnancy and work. It's a lot. How far along?" 5 months. Paula's face softened. "And you're still working these shifts? Honey, you should be resting. You should be letting someone take care of you. Can't afford to rest. Can't afford someone taking care of me." "So I work." They cleaned in silence for a while. Then Paula spoke again, voice carrying the weight of experience. "You know what I've learned in 20 years cleaning rich people's messes? Money doesn't care who has it. It just sits there, neutral, waiting to be used. The people who get ahead are the ones who take their chances when they appear, even if those chances look impossible." The words resonated deeper than Paula probably intended. Carmen finished the shift, collected her cash payment, drove back to the bunker as desert dawn painted the sky orange and pink. Melissa was awake, making instant oatmeal with their camping stove. She'd been crying, eyes red and swollen. Morning sickness had been brutal overnight. She looked exhausted, defeated. 7 months pregnant and living underground because they had nowhere else to go. "Mom, I can't do this much longer." Her voice broke. "I'm trying to be strong, trying to be grateful we have shelter. But this isn't a life. This is surviving. And I'm bringing a baby into it. What kind of mother does that?" Carmen sat beside her daughter, pulled her close. The kind of mother who's doing everything she can with what she has. The kind who doesn't give up even when giving up would be easier. "You're stronger than you know, baby. We both are. But what if strength isn't enough? What if we're strong and determined and still lose?" The question hung between them. Carmen had no answer except the one she'd been avoiding. Unless we change something fundamental. Unless something shifts in our favor. That afternoon, Carmen made a decision. She needed to know exactly what she had. Exact currencies. Exact amounts. Exact potential value. She needed inventory. She returned to the vault with a notepad and camera. Opened the door with hands that no longer shook because fear had transformed into determination. If this fortune was real, she'd claim it. If claiming it was illegal, she'd figure that out second. But she couldn't make informed decisions without information. The inventory took 6 hours. She photographed every shelf, recorded every currency bundle, noted the denominations and quantities marked on the paper bands, created spreadsheets tracking what she found. British pounds, approximately 847,000 pounds in various denominations, from 1965 to 1989. German marks, 6.2 million Deutsche Marks from 1970 to 1990. French francs, 3.8 million francs from 1968 to 1989. Swiss francs, 1.9 million from 1972 to 1991. Japanese yen, 180 million yen from 1975 to 1988. And then the currencies from dissolved nations. Soviet rubles, 15 million. East German marks, 8 million. Yugoslavian dinars, 22 million. Czechoslovakian korunas, 5 million. These were likely worthless except as collector's items. But even collector's markets had value for large quantities. She found more. Chinese yuan from the 1980s. South Korean won. Brazilian cruzeiros. Mexican pesos. Turkish lira. Currency from every continent, every major nation, spanning 3 decades of Cold War operations. The bottom shelf held something different. Gold coins. Not many, maybe 200. But each one was Krugerrands, Canadian maple leafs, American eagles. Pure gold in 1-ounce denominations. At current prices, roughly $2,000 per ounce. That alone was $400,000. Carmen sat back against the cold concrete wall and did calculations her tired brain could barely process. Conservative estimates, only counting currencies that definitely retained conversion value. British pounds at modern exchange rates, $1.1 million. German marks converted to euros, $4.3 million. Swiss francs, $2.2 million. Japanese yen, $1.4 million. French francs, $650,000. The gold, $400,000. Total for definite value, $10.05 million. But wait, she'd been calculating face value at time of issue. Currency appreciated. Inflation meant 1960s money had more modern buying power. Historical exchange rates were higher. She needed expert valuation. Even the worthless Soviet money had value to collectors, museums, historical societies, wealthy collectors who specialized in Cold War memorabilia. 1 million Soviet rubles might fetch $50,000 to the right buyer. Multiply that across all the obsolete currencies. Conservative estimate, $12 million. A realistic estimate, $20 to $25 million. Optimistic estimate accounting for auction values and collector premiums, $35 to $40 million. And if the paper bands were wrong, if the amounts were understated, if there were more coins or precious metals she'd missed. The listing that had brought her here flashed through her mind, $1 minimum bid. She'd paid $47.50 total for a bunker containing potentially tens of millions in forgotten currency. Carmen closed the vault, sealed it, walked back to their living quarters in a daze. The scale was beyond comprehension. This wasn't finding a few $1,000s. This was generational wealth. This was never worrying about money again. This was Melissa's baby having every advantage. College funds, health care, security. If she could keep it. If it was legally hers. If powerful people didn't take it away. That night, she told Melissa. Couldn't keep it secret anymore. Showed her the photographs, the spreadsheets, the calculations. Watched her daughter's face cycle through disbelief, shock, hope, fear. This is real. Melissa's voice was barely a whisper. All that money? Just sitting there? For 30 years. Forgotten. Abandoned. And legally, we own everything in this bunker. The question is whether the government will agree that forgotten means abandoned, or whether they'll claim it was theirs and we have to return it. Can they do that? Just take it? They can try. Depends on how we handle it. If we report it immediately, we might get a finder's fee. Usually 10% for lost property returned to owners. If we claim ownership through property rights, we might keep everything but face legal battles. Whereas if we try to convert it quietly without reporting, we risk criminal charges. All the options felt like walking through a minefield blindfolded. No clear, safe path, just choices with different risks. Melissa's hand went to her belly, protective and certain. We claim it. We fight for it. I'm tired of being powerless. Tired of people looking at us like we're nothing. You bought this property legally. Whatever was in it came with the sale. We claim it, and we fight anyone who says otherwise. The fierceness in her daughter's voice made Carmen's throat tight. When had the scared 19-year-old become this? When had survival hardened into steel? Okay, we claim it. But we do it smart. We get a lawyer first. We understand our rights before we tell anyone what we found. We build a case. How do we afford a lawyer? The gold coins. We take 5. Convert them quietly. Use that money to hire legal help. We document everything. We make sure if this goes to court, we can prove we acted in good faith, followed the law, tried to do things right. The plan crystallized over the next week. Carmen researched lawyers who specialized in property law and military surplus. Found one in Las Vegas, Marcus Chen, former military attorney who'd transitioned to private practice. His website mentioned experience with federal property disputes and finder's rights cases. She called his office, got a receptionist who scheduled a consultation for Friday. Fee was $500 for 2 hours. Carmen took 5 gold coins to a specialty dealer, a place that asked no questions and paid cash. $9,800. She kept $2,000 for immediate needs, put the rest toward legal help. Friday arrived. Marcus Chen's office was professional, but not ostentatious. The man himself was 40-something, sharp-eyed, wearing a suit that suggested competence without excess. He listened to Carmen's story without interruption, took notes, asked precise questions. When she finished, he sat back. This is complicated, fascinating, but complicated. You have several factors working in your favor, and several that could destroy you. Tell me both. In your favor, you purchased the property through legal government auction. The listing sold the bunker as is with all contents. There's legal precedent for finders claiming abandoned property. The currency has been sitting forgotten for 30 years, suggesting genuine abandonment rather than temporary storage. See against you. Military installations sometimes have separate clauses about classified or sensitive materials. The currency could be considered government property that should have been removed before decommissioning. There's potential argument that valuable items don't count as abandoned, just misplaced. And if the government wants it back, they have resources to make your life hell through litigation, even if you're technically right. What do you recommend? Document everything meticulously. Get a full professional appraisal of the currency from an expert in Cold War-era foreign money. File a formal claim of ownership with the Nevada State Land Management Office and the Defense Department's Surplus Property Division. Be completely transparent. Show you're acting in good faith. Then wait to see if anyone contests your claim. And if they do, we fight. Property law is on your side more than you'd think. The government can't just reclaim things they abandoned and sold, but they can make the process expensive and time-consuming. That's where most people give up. I won't give up. Marcus studied her with new attention. Most people say that. You might actually mean it. Okay, I'll take your case. Retainer is $5,000. That covers initial documentation and filing. If this goes to litigation, we'll need more. But I believe you have a strong claim. Let's make it formal. Carmen paid from the gold coin money, left his office with a lawyer and a plan. The relief was physical. Tension she'd been carrying finally easing. The appraisal took 3 weeks to arrange. Marcus connected her with Dr. Helena Voss, a currency historian who'd worked for major auction houses and museums. Doctor. Voss arrived at the bunker on a Tuesday morning, a woman in her 60s, with gray hair in a professional bun and eyes that assessed everything with academic precision. Carmen led her to the vault, opened it, stepped aside. Dr. Voss stood frozen in the doorway for a full minute. Then she pulled out a phone and started taking photographs. Her hands shook slightly. Voice came out hoarse. Ms. Ruiz, do you understand what you have here? Money from the Cold War. That's what I was told. This is an intelligence agency operations fund. This is CIA or NSA or defense intelligence. This is what they used to pay informants, fund covert operations, bribe officials, finance revolutions. This is history. This is evidence of things that were never supposed to be documented. She spent 8 hours in the vault, examining currency, taking samples, documenting everything with the thoroughness of someone who understood significance. When she emerged, her professional composure had cracked. Conservative valuation, accounting only for convertible currency at historical exchange rates and current precious metals. Prices. $18.4 million. Moderate valuation, including collector markets and auction premiums, $31.7 million. Optimistic valuation if everything is sold through specialty channels to maximize value, $47.2 million. Carmen's knees went weak. Dr. Voss steadied her. But Miss Ruiz, there's something else, something important. What? This currency includes denominations and mint dates that suggest it was collected between 1958 and 1991. Some of these bills are from accounts we know were intelligence operations. I can trace them. The yuan notes. Those are from the series the CIA used in Southeast Asia. The German marks. Those match operations in Berlin. This isn't just money. This is proof of classified operations. Is that bad for us? It complicates things. The government might claim the currency itself is classified evidence that should never have been left behind. They'll want it back, not for the money, but for the secrets it represents. Can they take it? Legally? Unclear. Practically? They'll try. You need to be prepared for federal agencies showing up, for pressure, for offers that sound generous, but are designed to make you go away quietly. What do I do? Fight. Document. Go public if you have to. The government hates publicity around classified screw-ups. If you make this public, show you're acting legally and transparently, they're less likely to use heavy-handed tactics. Marcus filed the ownership claim the next day. Formal documentation to Nevada State Land Management, the Defense Department, the CIA's surplus property liaison, and for good measure, the National Archives. Claiming ownership of contents found in decommissioned bunker purchased through legal auction, including full inventory and professional appraisal. Requesting confirmation of legal ownership. The response came faster than expected. 3 days later, a letter from the Defense Department's legal office, tersely worded. The materials described in your claim may include classified government property. We are investigating the matter. Do not attempt to sell, move, or alter the materials until this investigation concludes. Marcus read the letter and smiled grimly. They're scared. This response is fear disguised as authority. They don't actually know if they have a legal claim, so they're stalling while they figure it out. What do? We wait. But we prepare. I'm going to reach out to journalists I trust. Get the story ready to go public if the government tries anything aggressive. Public pressure is your best defense. Carmen returned to the bunker that evening to find 3 men standing near the entrance. Not government, not military. Wrong vibe entirely. Expensive casual clothes. The kind of confidence that came from money and connections. The tallest one stepped forward. Ms. Ruiz, my name is Richard Kellerman. I represent a private investment group. We've heard about your discovery. How did you hear about it? The claim was filed 48 hours ago. Word travels in certain circles. We understand you found a collection of Cold War currency. We'd like to make an offer. $5 million cash. Immediate payment. Complete confidentiality. You sign over rights to everything in the vault and walk away with life-changing money. Carmen's pulse hammered. Who are you really? Kellerman smiled. Does it matter? We're offering you more money than you'll see in litigation. The government will drag you through courts for years. Cost you hundreds of thousands in legal fees. Probably win because they have infinite resources, and you don't. We're offering a clean exit. I'm not interested. His smile didn't waver, but something cold entered his eyes. Ms. Ruiz, you're pregnant, living in a bunker, raising a pregnant daughter. You're vulnerable. We're not the only people who know what you found. Others will come. Some won't be as polite. Take the offer. Take the money. Protect your family. The threat was clear. Veiled, but clear. Carmen's fear transformed to anger. Get off my property. Think about it. You have 48 hours. After that, the offer expires and other people start taking interest. They left. Carmen watched their SUV disappear down the dirt road. Then she called Marcus, told him about the visitors. He cursed. I was afraid of this. The currency's value makes it a target. Private collectors, criminal organizations, intelligence agencies who don't want their Cold War operations exposed. You need protection. From who? We can't afford private security. I know someone. Retired FBI agent who does consulting work. Owes me a favor. I'll call him. The agent arrived the next morning. Frank Morrison. 60-something, weathered face, eyes that missed nothing. He walked the bunker perimeter, checked sight lines, assessed vulnerabilities. You're isolated. That's good and bad. Good because you see anyone coming. Bad because if trouble arrives, help is far away. I recommend cameras, motion sensors, and you need to think about what you'll do if someone tries to take this by force. I have a daughter. I have a baby coming. I'm not equipped for war. Then don't fight. Have an escape plan. Have evidence backed up off-site. Make sure if something happens to you, the story still gets out. That's your real protection. Make yourself too dangerous to silence. He helped install security cameras, cheap ones from hardware stores, but functional. Motion activated. Recording to cloud storage that would preserve evidence, even if the equipment was destroyed. Melissa watched from the doorway, hand on her belly. Mom, this is crazy. Maybe we should just take the money. $5 million is more than we'd ever need. And what message does that send? That rich people can buy anything? That power wins? That we should be grateful for scraps when we have legal claim to the whole thing? But what if they hurt us? What if we lose everything trying to keep it? The question hung heavy. Carmen had no good answer, just the stubborn certainty that giving up without fighting meant teaching her daughters that survival required submission, and she refused to teach them that. The countdown began. 48 hours until Kellerman's offer expired. Marcus prepared to go public with the story. Contacted journalists at the Las Vegas Review-Journal and the Associated Press. Reporters who covered government accountability and military stories. But before the deadline, another letter arrived. So this one from a federal agency Carmen had never heard of. The Defense Intelligence Agency's Special Property Recovery Unit, requesting immediate access to the bunker to assess materials, implying that resistance would result in federal warrants and forced entry. Marcus called a contact at the ACLU. Within hours, they had pro bono attorneys volunteering to observe any federal inspection, ensuring Carmen's rights were protected. The inspection happened on day 47. 6 federal agents in suits and gloves. 2 attorneys. Frank Morrison watching everything. Dr. Voss documenting the process on Carmen's behalf. The lead agent, a woman named Diane Foster, was professional but cold. She examined the vault, took samples, photographed everything, then delivered her assessment. These materials are classified government property that should have been removed during decommissioning. The failure to remove them was bureaucratic error, not intentional abandonment. Therefore, they remain federal property. We're prepared to offer a finder's fee of $500,000 for their return. Carmen stood her ground. With all respect, Agent Foster, your own auction listed this property as containing everything as is. You sold it. I bought it. That makes it mine. We sold a structure, not classified materials. Show me where classified materials are exempted in the sale documents. The ACLU attorney stepped forward. Because I've reviewed every page, no such exemption exists. Your agency made a mistake. That doesn't give you the right to undo a legal sale. Agent Foster's jaw tightened. This will be resolved in court. Then I guess we'll see you in court. After they left, Marcus exhaled hard. You just told the federal government to pound sand. That takes guts or insanity. Maybe both. What happens now? They'll file to recover the property. We'll counterfile asserting your ownership rights. Judge will have to decide. Could take months, maybe years. Meanwhile, the currency sits in that vault, and your life is in limbo. Can we win? Honestly? 50-50. The law is on your side. But the government has resources and motivation. This is going to get ugly. That night, Carmen sat with Melissa in their small living area. LED lanterns casting shadows on concrete walls, both of them exhausted, both carrying babies that would be born into this conflict. Are we doing the right thing? Melissa's question was quiet, genuine. I don't know, baby. I just know that running, surrendering, taking whatever scraps they offer, it doesn't feel right. We've been powerless our whole lives, poor, dismissed, told to be grateful for whatever we get. This time, we have something. Something valuable. Something we legally own. And I'm tired of giving up before we even try to keep it. But what if we lose everything? Then we lose with dignity, with self-respect, with the knowledge that we fought. That's worth something, isn't it? Melissa was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. Yeah, it is. The lawsuit came the following week. United States of America versus Carmen Ruiz, filed in federal court, seeking return of property and damages for possession of classified materials. The media picked up the story the same day. Homeless pregnant woman battles government over Cold War treasure. No, the narrative was too good not to cover. Underdog versus federal power. David versus Goliath with millions of dollars at stake. The public response shocked Carmen. Donations poured into a legal defense fund Marcus had set up. Strangers sending $10, $20, $100 because they believed in her fight. Social media exploded with support. #StandWithCarmen trended for 3 days. But with publicity came more pressure. Her sister called. Carmen, this is insane. Just give it back. You're making enemies you can't afford to have. Rita from the storage facility gave an interview calling Carmen irresponsible. People who live in storage units shouldn't be fighting the government over money that isn't theirs. Former co-workers gossiped, always knew she was trouble. Gold digger mentality. Thinks she deserves millions for doing nothing. The mockery hurt. The doubt hurt. But the support helped. Hundreds of messages from people who understood what it meant to be powerless, who saw this fight as symbolic of larger injustices. One message stuck with Carmen, from a woman in Tennessee who'd lost her home in foreclosure. You're fighting for all of us, everyone who's ever been told we don't matter. Don't give up. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks out. Time for both sides to prepare arguments. Time for Carmen to live in suspended animation, knowing that everything depended on a judge's decision. Melissa went into labor on a Thursday evening, 2 weeks early. Carmen drove her to the hospital, hand gripping her daughter's hand, telling her to breathe, to push, to be strong. At 3:47 a.m., Carmen became a grandmother. Sophia Rose Ruiz entered the world weighing 6 pounds, 8 ounces. Perfect. Healthy. Crying with the indignation of someone who hadn't asked to be born into this chaos. Melissa held her daughter with tears streaming. Look at her, Mom. Look at what we're fighting for. Carmen touched her granddaughter's tiny hand, felt the grip of impossibly small fingers, saw the future in that face, all the possibilities, all the potential. This baby would never know poverty if Carmen could prevent it, would never sleep in a storage unit or a car, or wonder where the next meal came from, would grow up with advantages Carmen had never had, but only if she won, only if the judge sided with them, only if powerful forces didn't crush them. The fight wasn't over. It had barely begun. But holding that baby, Carmen felt something crystallize. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about dignity, about standing up, about teaching her daughters and granddaughter that power could be challenged, even when the odds were impossible, even when everyone said you couldn't win, even when the smart move was surrender. Sometimes you fought anyway, because the fight itself mattered. The hospital room was quiet. Sophia sleeping against Melissa's chest. Dawn breaking through windows. A new day. A new life. A new chapter in a story that wasn't finished. Carmen's phone buzzed. Text from Marcus. Preliminary hearing moved up. 3 days. Judge wants to expedite. Be ready. She looked at her sleeping granddaughter, at her exhausted daughter, at the life they'd somehow built from nothing. Ready. She'd been ready from the moment she bid $1 on an impossible dream. Ready from the moment she chose dignity over surrender. The government thought they could intimidate her. Kellerman's group thought they could buy her. Doubters thought she'd break under pressure. They were all about to learn otherwise, because Carmen Ruiz had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. And that made her more dangerous than they could possibly understand. The federal courthouse in Las Vegas rose like a monument to authority, glass and steel reflecting the desert sun with the kind of intimidation that was entirely intentional. Carmen stood on the steps, Melissa beside her, holding 2-week-old Sophia wrapped in a blanket, and felt the weight of what they were about to do. Marcus appeared at her elbow, briefcase in hand, wearing his best courtroom suit. Ready? No. But let's go anyway. The courtroom was packed. Journalists filled the back rows, supporters who'd followed the story online, legal observers, and in the front row, government attorneys in matching dark suits, carrying themselves with the confidence of people who'd never lost to someone like Carmen. Richard Kellerman sat 3 rows back, watching with an expression that suggested he was already calculating how to acquire the currency once the government won. Next to him, a woman Carmen didn't recognize took notes on an expensive tablet. The bailiff called the court to order. Everyone rose as Judge Patricia Holloway entered. She was 50-something, gray hair in a professional cut, eyes that suggested she'd seen every legal argument, and had patience for none that weren't solid. This is a preliminary hearing to determine ownership of materials found in a decommissioned military bunker. The government claims the materials are classified property that should have been removed before the facility was sold. Ms. Ruiz claims ownership through legal purchase. Both sides have filed extensive briefs. I've reviewed them. Let's hear arguments. The government's attorney stood. Bernard Walsh, Senior Litigation Counsel for the Defense Department. His voice carried the polish of someone who'd argued before Supreme Court justices. Your Honor, this case is straightforward. The materials in question are classified foreign currency used in intelligence operations. They should have been removed during decommissioning in 1992. The failure to remove them was bureaucratic error, not intentional abandonment. Classified materials remain government property regardless of subsequent property transfers. Ms. Ruiz has no legal claim. Marcus rose, and Carmen noticed his hands were steady, unlike hers, which shook despite her best efforts to control them. Your Honor, with respect, Mr. Walsh's argument ignores fundamental property law. The government sold this bunker through public auction with explicit language that it was sold as is, including all contents. The listing made no exceptions for classified materials. No reservations were stated. The sale was completed, payment received, deed transferred. Under Nevada law and federal property law, that transfer included everything on the premises. The government's failure to remove materials they now claim were classified is not Ms. Ruiz's responsibility. She purchased legally. She owns legally. Judge Holloway looked at Walsh. Your auction listing. Did it specify exceptions? Walsh hesitated for just a fraction of a second. It included standard language about hazardous materials and the buyer assuming all environmental risks. That's not what I asked. Did it specifically exempt classified materials from the sale? The standard language is understood to include yes or no, counselor. No, Your Honor, not explicitly. The judge made a note. Continue. Walsh pivoted. Your Honor, even if the sale language is imperfect, there's a larger principle at stake. These materials document covert operations, intelligence work that remains classified. Allowing them to remain in private hands creates national security risks. The government has both legal and security reasons to reclaim them. Marcus stood again. The government is attempting to use national security as a shield for their own negligence. These materials sat forgotten for 33 years. If they truly posed security risks, why weren't they retrieved in 1992, or 2000, or 2010? The government had 3 decades to realize their mistake and remedy it. They didn't. They sold the property. They got paid. Now they want to undo a legal transaction because they realized what they gave away. Judge Holloway leaned forward. Mr. Walsh, explain the timeline. When did your agency become aware these materials were left behind? Last month, when Mrs. Ruiz filed her ownership claim. And in the 33 years prior, no audit, no inventory, no attempt to verify that classified materials had been properly removed. The decommissioning was handled by a different division. Records were incomplete. So the government lost track of millions of dollars in foreign currency and classified operations funds for over 3 decades. Forgot about them entirely. And now wants to claim they weren't actually abandoned? Your Honor, the government's intent was never to abandon classified materials. The fact that they were forgotten doesn't change their classified status. The judge's expression suggested she found that argument as compelling as Carmen did. I'm going to hear from Ms. Ruiz directly. Ms. Ruiz, please approach. Carmen stood on legs that felt made of water, walked to the witness stand, placed her hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Sat in the chair that felt both too large and too small. Judge Holloway studied her. Ms. Ruiz, tell me in your own words how you came to purchase this property. Carmen took a breath and told the story. The eviction notice, the storage unit, being homeless and pregnant with a pregnant daughter, finding the auction listing, now bidding $1 because it was all she could afford, moving into the bunker because they had nowhere else to go, discovering the sealed vault weeks later while exploring, finding the combination in abandoned maintenance records, opening the door to find 33 years of forgotten currency. Her voice stayed steady. She didn't cry or beg or play for sympathy, just stated facts. Let the truth speak for itself. When did you realize the materials might be valuable? When I saw how much there was, how organized, how deliberately sealed away. I researched, hired an attorney, got professional appraisal, filed legal claim, did everything transparently because I wanted to do this right. I'm not a thief. I'm someone who bought property legally and found what was inside. What would you do with the money if the court rules in your favor? Provide for my daughter and granddaughter. Give them opportunities I never had. Maybe help other families who are where we were, homeless, desperate, invisible. I'd show them that sometimes the system does work, that fighting for yourself matters. The courtroom was silent. Carmen returned to her seat. Melissa squeezed her hand. Sophia slept through it all, oblivious to the fact that her future was being decided. Judge Holloway called Dr. Voss. The currency expert testified about the collection's scope and significance, confirmed it was intelligence operations funding, explained how it had been meticulously organized and then forgotten. The government tried to shake her testimony. Failed. Dr. Voss had 40 years of expertise and answered every question with precision that left no room for doubt. She has made herself clear this is authentic Cold War currency used in classified operations, that it was deliberately stored and then abandoned, that its value ranges from $18 to $47 million, depending on how it's liquidated. Frank Morrison testified about security concerns, explained that Carmen had cooperated fully with federal inspections, had installed cameras and taken precautions, was not trying to hide or smuggle anything, just claiming what was legally hers. The government called their own expert, a Defense Department historian who testified that leaving classified materials in a decommissioned facility was unprecedented, that it represented a security breach, that national interest demanded recovery. Marcus cross-examined. So this breach went unnoticed for 33 years? It appears so, during which time the facility was transferred from military to federal to state management? Correct. Multiple opportunities to discover the error? In theory, yes. And yet no one checked until Ms. Ruiz filed her claim? That's correct. Doesn't that suggest genuine abandonment rather than temporary oversight? The witness hesitated. It suggests significant administrative failure. The day ended without a ruling. Judge Holloway announced she'd review all evidence and issue a decision within 2 weeks. Carmen left the courthouse exhausted. Reporters shouted questions. She ignored them all. Returned to the bunker where Sophia needed feeding and Melissa needed rest, and life continued regardless of legal outcomes. The waiting was torture. Every day felt like a year. Carmen worked cleaning jobs to keep money coming in, cared for her granddaughter, helped Melissa recover from childbirth, tried not to think about the vault and the fortune that might be taken away. Marcus called with updates. The judge had requested additional documentation, was reviewing precedents, taking this seriously, all of which could mean anything or nothing. Richard Kellerman called directly, bypassed Marcus entirely. His voice was smooth and dangerous. Ms. Ruiz, regardless of what the judge decides, my offer stands. In fact, I'll raise it. $8 million. Cash. Today. Walk away with your dignity and enough money to live well forever. No, you're going to lose. Walsh is good. The government has unlimited resources. Even if you win at this level, they'll appeal, drag you through years of litigation, bankrupt you with legal fees. Is that really what you want? What I want is what's mine, what I legally purchased and legally own. Money you offer me is buying my surrender. I'm not for sale. Everyone's for sale. It's just a matter of price. Then you don't have enough. She hung up. Marcus called 5 minutes later. Kellerman's group is getting aggressive. They've been contacting property lawyers, trying to find ways to claim the bunker through adverse possession or some other angle. They want that currency badly. Why? It's not even theirs. Because people like that see money and assume they deserve it more than someone like you. They can't fathom that a homeless woman might actually keep millions of dollars. In their world, wealth flows to the wealthy. You're disrupting that. Good. Let them be disrupted. 2 weeks became 3, then 4. Judge Holloway was being thorough, so Carmen tried to see that as positive, tried not to spiral into worst-case thinking. Then on a Tuesday afternoon, Marcus called. His voice was carefully neutral. Judge issued her ruling. We need to be in court tomorrow at 10. The tone suggested he knew the outcome. Carmen couldn't tell if it was good or bad. Did we win? Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Be there. That night, Carmen couldn't sleep. Lay in her bunk staring at concrete ceiling while Melissa and Sophia slept across the room. This bunker had been home for 3 months. It was shelter, but not comfort. Safety, but not warmth. If they lost, they'd still have the bunker. Still have this underground concrete box. but they'd also have proven that fighting was futile. That power won. That people like her should accept their place. If they won, everything changed. A morning came too slowly and too fast. Carmen dressed in her best clothes, a thrift store outfit that still looked worn but at least clean. Melissa stayed behind with Sophia, both of them too fragile for courtroom drama. The courthouse steps felt different this time. Carmen climbed them with Marcus at her side and a certainty settling into her bones. Whatever happened, she'd fought. She'd stood up. That had to mean something. The courtroom was even more packed than before. News of the ruling had spread. Everyone wanted to witness the verdict. Judge Holloway entered. Everyone rose. Carmen's heart hammered so hard she thought the whole room could hear it. The judge sat, opened a folder, looked directly at Carmen before speaking. I've spent considerable time reviewing this case. The legal arguments are complex, the precedents are mixed. But ultimately, the question is straightforward. Did the government sell this property and its contents, or did they sell the property while retaining rights to contents they deemed classified? The sale documents are clear. As is, all contents included, no exceptions stated. The government had every opportunity to specify reservations. They didn't. They sold the facility completely and collected payment. Mr. Walsh argues that classified materials remain government property, regardless of transfer. But the government bears the burden of proving these materials maintained classified status. They presented no evidence that the currency was ever properly classified under formal processes. No documentation. No paperwork. Just the assertion that because it was used in intelligence operations, it must have been classified. That's not sufficient. The government's own negligence in losing track of these materials for 33 years undermines any claim that they were actively classified and protected. Carmen's breath caught. Was she saying, furthermore, even if the materials were originally classified, the government's complete abandonment and failure to exercise any control for over 3 decades constitutes de facto declassification through neglect? Ms. Ruiz purchased this property legally. She discovered abandoned materials. She acted in good faith, seeking legal counsel and filing proper claims. She did not attempt to hide or smuggle anything. She followed the law. The government made mistakes, multiple mistakes over multiple decades. They do not get to correct those mistakes by taking property from someone who did everything right. Therefore, this court finds that the materials in question, specifically the foreign currency and precious metals found in the sealed vault, are the legal property of Ms. Carmen Ruiz by right of purchase and finder's claim. The government's petition for recovery is denied. The gavel came down. The sound echoed like thunder. Carmen couldn't move, couldn't process what she'd just heard. The room erupted. Reporters rushed out to file stories. Supporters cheered. The government attorneys gathered their materials with tight faces. Marcus grabbed her arm. Carmen, we won! Do you understand? We won. The words still didn't feel real. Won. They'd won. The fortune was hers. Legally. Officially. Confirmed by federal court. Judge Holloway spoke again. One more thing. Ms. Ruiz, this court recognizes that you've been placed in extraordinary circumstances through no fault of your own. You have my admiration for how you've handled this. I wish you and your family well. Thank you. Carmen's voice came out as a whisper. Thank you, Your Honor. Outside, the courthouse steps became a stage. Reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed. Questions shouted from every direction. Marcus held up a hand. Brief statement only. Ms. Ruiz will not be taking detailed questions at this time. Carmen stood at the microphone, Melissa beside her now, Sophia in her arms. The baby had been brought by a supporter who'd been watching her. Carmen looked at her daughter, her granddaughter, and thought about the journey that had brought them here. 3 months ago, we were homeless, living in a storage unit, facing eviction. I took a chance on a condemned bunker because we had nowhere else to go and nothing left to lose. What we found changed everything. Not just the money, though that matters, but the realization that sometimes fighting is worth it, that sometimes the system does work, that sometimes David beats Goliath. This fortune will help my family, but more importantly, I hope this case helps other people understand that you don't have to accept what powerful people tell you. You don't have to surrender just because the odds look impossible. You have rights. You have dignity. You have the ability to stand up for yourself. Her voice broke slightly. To everyone who supported us, who donated to the legal fund, who sent messages of encouragement, thank you. You made this possible. This victory isn't just mine. It belongs to everyone who's ever felt powerless. The applause was thunderous. Carmen stepped away from the microphone, overwhelmed. Richard Kellerman approached in the chaos. His expression was unreadable. Ms. Ruiz, congratulations. Truly, you played a bad hand better than I expected. Was that supposed to be a compliment? It was. He pulled out a business card. When you're ready to liquidate the currency, call me. I can connect you with private buyers who'll pay premium rates. Consider it my apology for underestimating you. Why would you help me? Because you won fair and square. And because I respect competence when I see it. He walked away before she could respond. The drive back to the bunker was surreal. Marcus came with them, along with Frank Morrison. They needed to discuss next steps, liquidation strategies, tax implications, security concerns now that Carmen was publicly wealthy. But first, Carmen needed to see the vault, needed to confirm this was real. They walked the familiar path to Section D. Carmen opened the door she'd opened dozens of times, but this time was different. This time, everything on those shelves belonged to her, with no caveats, no disputes, no threats of seizure. Marcus spoke first. The liquidation will take months, maybe a year. We need to work with currency specialists, auction houses, private collectors. Do it carefully to maximize value. But Carmen, you need to understand something. What? You're wealthy now, genuinely wealthy. Even conservative estimates put your net worth at $18 million minimum. After taxes, legal fees, liquidation costs, you'll still have at least $10 million clear. That's generational wealth, and that's never worrying about money again for you, Melissa, Sophia, and Sophia's children. The number didn't feel real. Carmen looked at the shelves, looked at currency from nations that no longer existed, at gold coins that had sat in darkness for 33 years, at evidence of a world that had ended when she was a child. All of this had been waiting, forgotten by everyone except the bureaucrats who'd sealed it away and then failed to remember where. What do we do first? First, we secure it properly, install a better security system, get insurance. Then we start the liquidation process. I recommend taking out a line of credit against the collection's value. Gives you immediate liquidity without having to rush sales. You can buy a house, get proper health care, enroll Melissa in college if she wants, and start living like the fortune is real while we work on converting it to actual cash. Carmen nodded slowly. What about taxes? Significant, but manageable. The found property will be taxed as income. We'll argue for capital gains treatment on the currency appreciation. With good accountants, you'll pay roughly 35 to 40% overall. Still leaves you with millions. They spent 3 hours planning. Marcus took notes. Frank discussed security upgrades. Dr. Voss called to offer congratulations and connections to auction houses that specialized in Cold War memorabilia. When they finally left, Carmen sat alone in the vault room. Melissa brought Sophia, and they sat together in silence. 3 generations, from homeless to wealthy in 3 months, from powerless to vindicated, from forgotten to famous. Melissa spoke first. What happens now? Now we start over. For real this time. We find a house, a real house, with windows and sunlight and space for Sophia to grow up. We make sure she never knows what it's like to be hungry, or scared, or wondering where she'll sleep. And the bunker? Carmen looked around the concrete room. We keep it. Maybe turn it into something useful. A shelter for homeless families. A museum documenting Cold War history. Something that gives back. This place saved us. We should let it save others. The transformation took 6 months to fully manifest. The currency liquidation was complex, requiring multiple auctions and private sales. Dr. Voss connected them with collectors worldwide who paid premium prices for rare denominations. The British pounds sold for $1.3 million. The German marks converted to euros brought $4.8 million. So the Swiss francs fetched $2.4 million. The Japanese yen was liquidated through Tokyo collectors for $1.6 million. Even the supposedly worthless Soviet currency found buyers, museums, and collectors paying $340,000 for the complete collection. The gold coins sold at auction for $487,000, well above their melt value because of their Cold War provenance. Total liquidation, $23.7 million. After taxes, legal fees, and costs, $14.2 million net. Carmen bought a house in Henderson, not a mansion, but a real home. 4 bedrooms, yard with grass, windows that opened, natural light flooding every room. Sophia's nursery was painted pale yellow with clouds on the ceiling. Melissa enrolled in community college, studying business management. The bunker became the Cold War Heritage Center. Carmen donated it to a non-profit that converted it into a museum and homeless shelter. Half the space became exhibits documenting intelligence operations and the currency collection's history. The other half became emergency housing for families in crisis. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The place where Carmen had lived in desperation now helped others escape similar circumstances. Families who'd been sleeping in cars or storage units could stay in the bunker's dormitory sections while getting back on their feet. Job training, child care, legal aid, all free. All funded by the fortune Carmen had found and fought to keep. Rita from the storage facility came to visit 6 months after the ruling. She stood in Carmen's new living room, seeing the comfortable furniture and the photos on walls and the evidence of stability. I owe you an apology. When you were living in the storage unit, I thought you were crazy for bidding on that bunker. Thought you were making bad decisions out of desperation. I was wrong. Carmen made tea, brought it to the table where they sat. You weren't wrong to be skeptical. The odds were against me. I got lucky. Number. Rita shook her head. Luck was finding the money. Keeping it. That was courage. That was refusing to back down when everyone, including the federal government, tried to make you give up. That's not luck. That's character. Her sister called from California, voice careful, probing. Carmen, I've been seeing the news. You really did it. You really won. Yeah, we did. I'm sorry I wasn't more supportive. I thought you were being foolish, risking everything on a long shot. I didn't believe you could actually win. Most people didn't. I didn't even believe it most days. But I had to try. For Melissa, for Sophia, for myself. Had to prove we weren't powerless. Her sister was quiet for a moment. I'm proud of you. I should have said that months ago. I'm proud of you. The words mattered more than Carmen expected. Thank you. That means a lot. They talked for an hour, repairing bridges that poverty and pride had damaged, making plans for her sister to visit, to meet Sophia, to see the house and the life Carmen had built from impossible circumstances. Melissa graduated from her first semester with a 3.8 GPA. She'd found her confidence again, found purpose beyond survival. Carmen watched her daughter present a business plan project and saw someone who'd transformed from scared teenager to capable adult. After the presentation, Melissa pulled Carmen aside. "Mom, see, I've been thinking about everything that happened, about how close we came to having nothing, about what you did to change that. What about it? I want to work at the Heritage Center, help families the way we needed help. Use what we learned to make sure other people don't fall through the cracks the way we did. You sure? You could do anything now. Business, travel, whatever you want. This is what I want. Sophia's going to grow up knowing that her grandmother fought a battle everyone said was impossible and won. I want her to grow up knowing her mother used that victory to help others. That wealth means responsibility." Carmen hugged her daughter tight. "Your grandfather would be so proud of you. Hell, I'm proud of you." The 1-year anniversary of the auction came on a Saturday. Carmen stood in the bunker-turned-heritage center, watching families move in. A single mother with 3 kids who'd been living in their van. A young couple who'd fled domestic violence and had nowhere safe to go. An elderly man whose fixed income hadn't kept pace with rent increases. All of them getting temporary housing, support services, a chance to stabilize and rebuild. All of them benefiting from Carmen's refusal to surrender. Frank Morrison approached, clipboard in hand. He'd become the center's security director. "We've housed 47 families in the past 8 months. Average stay is 6 weeks. 83% successfully transitioned to stable housing. Those are good numbers. They're your numbers. This place wouldn't exist without you. These families would be sleeping in cars or under bridges. You changed that." But Carmen watched Sophia toddle across the room, chasing her mother. 1 year old now. Healthy. Happy. Growing up with advantages Carmen had only dreamed of. Marcus called with news about the government's appeal. They filed it 6 weeks ago, but it's not going anywhere. Judge Holloway's ruling was airtight. They're going to withdraw. Word is they don't want the publicity of losing twice. So it's really over? It's really over. The money is yours. The precedent is set. Other people who find abandoned government property now have your case to cite. You didn't just win for yourself. You established law that protects finders' rights against federal overreach. That matters. Yeah, it does. Carmen hung up and sat in Thomas's old office. It had been converted into the center's administration space. She'd hung photos on the walls. The bunker entrance the day she first saw it. Melissa holding newborn Sophia. The courthouse steps after the ruling. The Heritage Center's opening day. A reminder of journey, of transformation, of what was possible when you refused to accept powerlessness. Dr. Voss published a book about the currency collection, the hidden fortune, intelligence operations, and the Cold War money trail. It became a bestseller. Carmen received royalties she'd donated to homeless services. The book's dedication read, "For Carmen Ruiz, who proved that ordinary people can challenge extraordinary power and win." Richard Kellerman sent a gift when Sophia turned 1, an antique compass with a note. "For finding your way through the darkness. With respect, RK." Carmen kept it on her desk, reminder that even people who'd opposed her could acknowledge her victory. 2 years after finding the vault, Carmen established a foundation. The Second Chance Foundation, funded with $5 million from her fortune. Mission: helping families in housing crisis with emergency support, legal aid, and transitional assistance. The board included Marcus, Frank, Dr. Voss, and Rita, people who'd been part of her journey in different ways. They met quarterly to review cases and allocate resources. In the first year, they helped 183 families, prevented evictions, paid medical bills, funded job training, gave people the breathing room they needed to stabilize. Carmen told Melissa once that the money itself wasn't the real fortune. The real fortune was the ability to help, to use resources to make genuine differences in lives that would otherwise be crushed by systems that didn't care. Melissa understood, but she'd lived it. She was raising Sophia with that understanding, teaching her that wealth meant responsibility, that privilege required action, that having more meant helping more. Carmen still lived modestly despite her millions. The house was comfortable, but not ostentatious. She drove a reliable car, but nothing flashy. Spent money on experiences and education rather than status symbols. Sometimes she went back to the bunker, now the Heritage Center, walked the corridors that had been her home during the darkest period, visited the vault room, now empty and converted to a conference space. The placard outside described what had been found there. The Cold War currency collection worth tens of millions, the legal battle, the precedent-setting ruling, the transformation of tragedy into triumph. Visitors came from around the country, some to see the historical exhibit, others to volunteer, many to seek help because they'd heard about the shelter program. Carmen met them all, told her story when asked, encouraged them to keep fighting when they felt defeated, reminded them that systems could be challenged, that power had limits, that ordinary people possessed extraordinary strength when they chose to use it. One evening, 3 years after the initial discovery, Carmen sat on her back porch, watching sunset, paint Nevada sky in shades of amber and rose. Sophia played in the yard, now 3 years old, chattering to herself in that stream of consciousness way toddlers had. Melissa joined her, carrying 2 glasses of iced tea. She'd graduated college with honors, was working as the Heritage Center's operations manager, planning to start graduate school in nonprofit management. Remember when we were living in that storage unit? Melissa's voice was quiet. When you showed me that auction listing and I thought you'd lost your mind? I remember thinking I might have. What made you do it? Really? What made you take that chance when everything said it was crazy? Carmen thought about the question, about desperation and determination, and the thin line between them, because the alternative was giving up, accepting that we'd always be powerless, always be at the mercy of systems and people who didn't care if we survived or disappeared. I couldn't accept that. Couldn't teach you to accept that. You taught me something better. That fighting matters even when you might lose. That dignity comes from trying, not from winning. Sophia ran over, demanding to be picked up. Carmen lifted her granddaughter into her lap, felt the solid weight of her. The reality of this child who would never know hunger or homelessness, who would grow up with opportunities, with security, with the knowledge that her grandmother had fought an impossible battle and somehow won. Tell me about the treasure, Nana. Sophia's favorite bedtime story was about the bunker and the vault and the fortune that changed everything. Once upon a time, there was a woman who had almost nothing. No home, no money, no hope. But she had courage. And when she found a door that was locked, she didn't walk away. She found the key. She opened the door. And behind that door was more than money. Behind that door was the future. Was it hard? So hard, baby. The hardest thing I've ever done. Powerful people told her to give up, told her she couldn't win. But she kept going, because sometimes the hardest thing is the right thing. And she won. She won. Not because she was special, but because she refused to quit. That's the real treasure, sweetheart. Not the money, the courage to keep fighting. Sophia nestled closer. Tell me the ending again. The ending is us. Right here. Right now. A safe home. A family that's together. A future that's bright. That's how the story ends. With love and hope, and the knowledge that tomorrow will be better than yesterday. The sun dipped below the horizon. Stars began appearing in the darkening sky. In the distance, the lights of Las Vegas glowed like earthbound constellations. Somewhere in that city, other families struggled. Other people faced impossible choices. Other women wondered if fighting was worth it. Carmen hoped some of them would hear her story and would understand that victory was possible, that systems could be challenged, that one person with nothing but determination and truth could stand against power and sometimes, against all odds, prevail. The fortune in the vault had been real, but the real wealth was this: her daughter thriving, her granddaughter secure, her legacy being measured not in dollars, but in lives helped and precedents set, and proving that ordinary people were capable of extraordinary things. The bunker that had been their desperate shelter had become a symbol, a place where transformation happened, where people at their lowest could find support and second chances and the resources to rebuild. Carmen had gone from homeless to wealthy, but more importantly, she'd gone from powerless to empowered, from invisible to visible, from voiceless to someone whose story would be told for years. Not because the money made her special, but because she'd fought when everyone said fighting was futile. Because she'd stood up when the smart move was surrender. Because she'd proven that dignity and determination could triumph over desperation and doubt. Sophia fell asleep in her arms. Melissa took her inside to bed. Carmen remained on the porch, feeling the evening air cool against her skin, listening to crickets and distant traffic and the quiet sounds of a neighborhood settling into night. 3 years ago, she'd been living in a storage unit with an eviction notice and $238 to her name. Tomorrow, she'd wake up in her own home. Check on the Heritage Center. Review grant applications from families seeking help. Continue building something that mattered. The treasure had been real, but the true fortune was what she'd done with it. How she'd transformed found wealth into lasting legacy. How she'd used victory to lift others, rather than just securing her own comfort. That was the story she wanted Sophia to learn. That was the lesson worth teaching. Not that winning was guaranteed, but that fighting was necessary. That courage mattered. That one person could make a difference if they refused to accept powerlessness. The stars wheeled overhead, constant, ancient, witnessing human struggles that rose and fell like tides. Carmen sat beneath them and felt grateful, not just for the money, though it had changed everything, but for the journey itself, for proving that sometimes, when everything seemed impossible, determination could bend reality toward justice. The Cold War currency had waited 33 years in a sealed vault, forgotten, abandoned, hidden, just like Carmen had felt, invisible to systems that didn't care if she existed or disappeared. But both had been found. Both had been claimed. Both had been given new purpose. And somewhere in Nevada's darkness, another family was probably struggling. Another woman was probably wondering if fighting was worth it. Another child was probably falling asleep, uncertain about tomorrow. Carmen hoped her story reached them, hoped it gave them courage, hoped it proved that sometimes, against all odds, the underdog won. Not because winning was easy, but because surrender was impossible. And in the end, that refusal to surrender was the real treasure, the real fortune, the real legacy worth leaving. Sophia's future was secure. Melissa's confidence was restored. Carmen's dignity was intact. and the bunker that had saved them now saved others. That was victory. Complete. Lasting. Real. The stars continued their eternal dance. Carmen closed her eyes and breathed deeply. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to use the fortune for good. But tonight, this moment, was enough. Was everything. Was proof that impossible dreams sometimes came true for people who refused to stop believing they deserved them. The treasure was real. The battle was won. And the story, this story of courage and determination and refusing to surrender, would be told for years to come. To every person who'd ever felt powerless, to every family who'd ever faced impossible odds, to every woman who'd ever wondered if fighting was worth it. This story was for them. This victory was for them. This proof that ordinary people could challenge extraordinary power and sometimes, miraculously, prevail. Carmen Ruiz had found a fortune in a Cold War bunker, but more importantly, she'd found herself, found her strength, found her voice, found her purpose. And that discovery was worth more than all the currency and all the vaults in all the world. The appraiser who came before Dr. Voss almost derailed everything. His name was Gerald Pratt, recommended by a colleague of Marcus's, and he arrived at the bunker wearing an expression that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. Carmen led him to the vault with growing unease. Something about his demeanor felt wrong, too casual, too dismissive. He spent maybe 20 minutes examining the currency, taking a few photographs, making notes that seemed perfunctory at best. His assessment came fast. Too fast. This collection is mostly worthless. Soviet currency is defunct. The conversion rates on the viable money won't exceed maybe $500,000. You'd be lucky to clear $200,000 after liquidation costs and taxes. Carmen felt her stomach drop. $500,000? But the sheer volume means nothing if there's no market. Ms. Ruiz, I understand you were hoping for more, but Cold War currency is a niche market with limited buyers. My professional recommendation is you take whatever offer comes your way and consider yourself fortunate. He left her his card and his assessment in writing. Carmen sat in the empty vault room feeling the weight of crushing disappointment. Had she fought so hard for something essentially worthless? Marcus reviewed Pratt's assessment that evening, and his face darkened. This is garbage. Complete garbage. He's either incompetent or corrupt. Probably corrupt. What do you mean? I mean someone likely paid him to lowball the valuation, make you think it's worthless so you'll accept a cheap buyout. Look at his methodology. He didn't test denominations, didn't verify authenticity, didn't research historical exchange rates. This isn't an appraisal. This is a hit job. Carmen's fear transformed to anger. Who would do that? Take your pick. Kellerman's group wants the currency cheap. The government wants you to feel it's not worth fighting for. Even smaller collectors might try to suppress value so they can buy in. This is why I'm getting Dr. Voss. She's incorruptible. Been in this field 40 years and never once compromised her integrity. When Dr. Voss arrived and delivered her assessment, 18 to 47 million, Carmen understood just how close she'd come to being scammed. If she'd believed Pratt, if she'd accepted his valuation as truth, she would have sold the collection for a fraction of its value, never knowing what she'd lost. The lesson crystallized. Powerful people used more than threats and lawsuits. They used misinformation, manipulation, making victims believe their claims were worthless so they'd surrender without fighting. Carmen called Pratt's office, left a message with his assistant. Tell Mr. Pratt his services are no longer needed, and tell him I know exactly what he tried to do. 3 days later, Pratt showed up at the bunker unannounced. His previous casualness was gone, replaced by defensive aggression. Ms. Ruiz, I understand you hired another appraiser. You should know that Dr. Voss has a reputation for inflating values to generate publicity. She has a reputation for accuracy. Your assessment was fraudulent. Who paid you? His face flushed. That's slander. I could sue you. Please do. I'd love to have your methodology examined in court. I'd love for a judge to see how you spent 20 minutes on a collection that took Dr. Voss 8 hours to properly evaluate. Get off my property. He left quickly. Carmen never heard from him again. But she learned something valuable. The fight wasn't just against obvious enemies. It was against subtle corruption. Systems designed to make people like her believe they didn't deserve to win. The night before the preliminary hearing, Carmen couldn't sleep. She paced the bunker corridors, anxiety making her restless. Well, what if Judge Holloway sided with the government? What if all this fighting had been for nothing? She found herself in what had been the bunker's recreation room. The ping-pong table was still there, dusty and warped, but functional. Carmen picked up a paddle, hit a ball against the wall. The rhythm was soothing, repetitive, the ball bouncing back with predictable physics that made sense when nothing else did. Mom. Melissa appeared in the doorway, Sophia sleeping against her shoulder. You okay? Scared. Tomorrow could change everything, or destroy everything. I don't know which. Melissa sat on one of the folding chairs, adjusting Sophia's position. Remember when I first got pregnant? When David left and I thought my life was over? Carmen nodded. You told me that sometimes the worst moments are actually doorways. That we can't see what's on the other side until we walk through them. This is your doorway, Mom. You've already done the hard part. You fought. You stood up. Whatever happens tomorrow, you did that. No one can take it away. But what if we lose? Then we lose, knowing we fought as hard as we could, that we didn't surrender, that we proved people like us matter. That's not nothing, Mom. That's everything. The words steadied something inside Carmen. She put down the paddle, crossed to her daughter, kissed Sophia's sleeping head. You're right. Whatever happens, we didn't give up. That has to count for something. During the courthouse hearing, there was a moment when Carmen thought they'd lost. Judge Holloway was questioning Marcus about precedents, and her tone suggested skepticism. Several of the cases you cite involve property that was clearly abandoned. Can you establish that classified materials fit that definition? Marcus stumbled slightly. The materials were forgotten for 33 years, Your Honor. Multiple agencies had oversight, and none retrieved them. That demonstrates. But not definitive abandonment, not formal declassification. The government's argument is that these materials should have been removed and weren't due to error, not intent. Carmen's heart sank. The judge was giving them an out, a reason to rule against them. Then Walsh, the government attorney, made a critical mistake. Your Honor, the government maintains that Ms. Ruiz had no reasonable expectation that the bunker contained anything of value. She purchased it for $1. She cannot now claim good faith discovery when the facility was sold as surplus. Judge Holloway's expression changed. So the government's position is that Ms. Ruiz should have known the bunker was worthless. Therefore, she has no claim to anything found inside. That's correct, Your Honor. But if she should have known it was worthless, then the government must have also known it was worthless, which means they knowingly sold worthless property. Yet now they claim the property contains millions in classified materials. Those positions are contradictory, Counselor. Walsh tried to recover. The government's knowledge and Ms. Ruiz's knowledge are separate issues. No, they're not. If the property was worthless, you sold worthless property and collected payment. If it contained classified materials, you committed gross negligence in failing to retrieve them before sale. You can't have it both ways. Either the sale was valid and complete, or your agency committed such egregious oversight that you forfeited any claim to recovery. That was the moment. Carmen saw it in Walsh's face, saw him realize he'd trapped himself in contradictory arguments, saw Judge Holloway's skepticism transform into something else: clarity, decision. After the ruling, after the press conference, after the initial celebration, Carmen returned to the bunker alone. She needed to process what had happened, needed to understand that the fight was actually over. She walked to the vault, opened it one more time, looked at the shelves lined with currency that was now definitively, legally, unquestionably hers. No more disputes, no more threats, just financial security beyond anything she'd imagined. But standing there, she felt something unexpected. Not triumph, not relief, something more complex: responsibility. This fortune wasn't just hers. It represented 33 years of secrecy, decades of intelligence operations, money that had funded covert actions, bribed officials, paid informants in dozens of countries. This currency had history, blood on it probably, moral complications she'd never fully understand. And now it was hers to do with as she chose. The weight of that settled on her shoulders. She could use this money selfishly, could live extravagantly, could forget where she'd come from and what she'd endured. Many people would. Many people would take this fortune and disappear into comfort, never looking back. But Carmen knew she couldn't do that. The bunker had saved her family. This fortune had saved their future. She had an obligation to extend that salvation to others, to use this wealth as a tool for good rather than just personal comfort. That's when the idea of the Heritage Center crystallized, not just as a nice gesture, but as a moral necessity. This place, this concrete tomb that had been their desperate shelter, needed to become something that honored its history while serving its future. The liquidation process revealed complications she hadn't anticipated. The British pounds were straightforward. Banks handled the conversion efficiently. But the German marks required navigating European Union currency regulations. The Japanese yen had to be sold through Tokyo brokers who charged significant premiums. The Swiss francs triggered anti-money laundering reviews that took weeks to clear. Each currency had its own challenges. Each transaction required documentation proving legal ownership. Each sale meant dealing with skeptical bankers who couldn't quite believe a homeless woman had legitimate claim to Cold War intelligence funds. Carmen spent months in meetings with financial advisors, currency brokers, tax attorneys, people who spoke in jargon and treated her with barely concealed condescension until Marcus or Dr. Voss reminded them exactly who they were dealing with. One banker, reviewing her account statements, actually said, "Mrs. Ruiz, are you sure you understand the complexity of managing this wealth? Perhaps you'd be more comfortable with a simplified portfolio managed by professionals." Carmen looked at him coldly. "I managed to survive homelessness while pregnant, managed to win a federal lawsuit against unlimited government resources, managed to liquidate Cold War currency through international markets. I think I can manage my own money, thank you." The banker never questioned her again. But there were also unexpected allies. A currency collector in Berlin who'd spent his career studying Cold War operations sent Carmen a letter, not asking to buy anything, just expressing admiration for her fight and offering advice on maximizing value through specialty auctions. A museum curator in Washington, D.C., reached out about acquiring some of the obsolete Soviet currency for educational exhibits, offered fair market value and the chance to see the money serve historical purposes. An elderly woman who'd been a CIA analyst in the 1970s sent a handwritten note. "Why, dear Ms. Ruiz, I helped account for some of the funds you found. We never imagined they'd be forgotten. We certainly never imagined they'd end up saving a homeless family. Sometimes God works in mysterious ways. You deserved to win. Thank you for reminding us that the system can still work." These moments mattered, reminded Carmen that not everyone was an enemy, that some people understood justice and celebrated when it prevailed. The Heritage Center's opening day brought surprises. 300 people attended. Local politicians, homeless advocates, families who'd been helped by Carmen's foundation. Media covering the transformation of a Cold War bunker into a symbol of second chances. But the most surprising attendee was Bernard Walsh, the government attorney who'd prosecuted the case against her. He approached Carmen during the reception, expression unreadable. "Ms. Ruiz, I wanted to congratulate you. The center is impressive. Thank you." Carmen kept her voice neutral. "I didn't expect to see you here. I came because I owed you an apology. I was doing my job during the trial, but that doesn't mean I was right. You deserve this. All of it. What you've built here proves that." His honesty disarmed her. "I appreciate that. It couldn't have been easy to lose. It wasn't. But losing to someone who uses their victory to help others? That's the kind of loss I can accept." He shook her hand and left. Carmen watched him go, feeling a weight lift. Even her adversaries could acknowledge her victory. Even those who'd fought against her could recognize justice when it prevailed. The bunker had been many things: a Cold War facility, a desperate shelter, a vault of forgotten fortune, a battleground, and now a beacon. A place where transformation happened, where people at their lowest could find support and dignity and the resources to rebuild. Standing in the converted command center, now the Heritage Center's welcome area, Carmen thought about the journey, about the eviction notice that had started everything, about the $1 bid that had seemed insane, about the sealed vault and the fortune it contained, about the battles fought and won. Every step had been necessary, every struggle had purpose, every moment of doubt had been a test that she'd somehow passed. And now, 3 years later, families she'd never meet would benefit from her courage. People she'd never know would find shelter in the place that had sheltered her. The cycle of salvation continued, expanding outward from that first desperate decision to take a chance on a condemned bunker. The treasure had been real, the vindication complete, the transformation total. But more than that, the story had become bigger than her, bigger than money, bigger than legal victories. It had become proof that fighting mattered, that courage counted, that ordinary people could challenge extraordinary power and sometimes, miraculously, prevail. And that lesson, that truth, that example would echo far beyond Carmen Ruiz and one Cold War bunker in the Nevada desert. It would echo wherever someone felt powerless, wherever someone faced impossible odds, wherever someone wondered if standing up was worth it. The answer, Carmen's life proved, was always yes. Always. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.